I will spend some extra time on it today. So yesterday, we talked about the cell membrane. And we find the cell membrane in what kind of cells?
Right. Oh, prokaryotes.
Both prokaryotes and eukaryotes, but in around the outside plant animal cells. And what's the purpose of the cell membrane? Yep, it controls what goes in and out of the cell. And we said that it also helps to maintain what in a cell?
Balance.
Yep. Balance, homeostasis. Okay? So we talked about temperature, pH, water balance, and glucose levels, right?
Yeah.
So today we're going to talk about actual types of transport. So there are two types, passive and active. So yesterday I told you passive goes from what to what? High to low, and does not require energy. So it goes from high to low, no energy. So think about going down the hill. Active transport, on the other end, goes from low to high, and it requires energy. So we need energy. Yeah, going up. Yep. And then when we're going down, whee, that's the easy part, right? No energy. Okay? So we're going to talk about some types of passive transport and some types of active transport. So one word before we get into there that you need to be familiar with is a concentration gradient. Okay? So concentration gradient is the difference in the amount of dissolved stuff on opposite sides of the cell membrane or the plasma membrane, because you can see it both ways. Okay? So remember that we used a term to describe the membrane, which is what? And what does selectively permeable mean? It chooses what can go through, right? So we said that certain molecules can pass through really easily, and other molecules are too large, like glucose molecules. So we also talked about what makes up the membrane. We have, here come my art skills, y'all. Yep. And the tails are what? Hydrophobic, which means afraid of water. They don't like water. And these guys are, they are hydrophilic, which means they like water. Right, very good. So we said that the cell membrane is made up of a what? What is this?
Two-layer wall.
We're not in math. A bilayer. What kind of bilayer? Close. Phospholipid bilayer, right? So that means it's made up of two layers. Then we also said there were some other macromolecules in there. What were they? Yep. Those are for cell recognition. And proteins. Proteins help transport things from one side to the other. Okay? And we'll talk about those a little more today too. So, passive transport. This is exactly what you need to know. It goes from areas of high concentration to areas of low concentration because it eventually wants to reach equilibrium, okay, because it wants to be balanced. So, it does this without using energy, okay? So, just like I've said, my hill, you can think of it like a slide. So if you start at the highest point, okay, you don't need energy to get to the bottom, right? So there are three types of passive transport we're going to talk about. Diffusion, facilitated diffusion, and osmosis, okay? So when we're talking about diffusion, simple diffusion, we're talking about the movement of molecules. So molecules are what are moving from high to low, okay? So They move from high to low so that they can eventually reach equilibrium. So I used an example of dye in water yesterday, right? So if you have a cup of water, you put dye in there, what happens? Spreads out, right? It doesn't happen instantly though, unless we were to stir it or shake it, right? Okay. So we also did some examples of this yesterday. So what direction will the molecules move? Inside. Okay? Because we're talking about molecules, right? When we talked about osmosis, it worked the opposite way. Okay, so the next one is osmosis. So this is the simple diffusion of water. So water molecules are moving from high to low. In diffusion, molecules are moving from high to low. Okay? So now here comes the part that I was telling you about yesterday. There are three types of solutions that we have to be familiar with in osmosis. Hyper, hypo, and iso. Okay? So in hypertonic, the cell is going to shrink or shrivel up. So that means that there is more salt or solute on the inside and less water. Okay? So the best way to think of that is being dehydrated, right? Because you don't have enough what? Water. Okay? In hypotonic, the cell is going to swell or even burst. Okay, but the cell is going to get bigger. I don't make this, but I'm gonna go with it. Yeah. I don't make this. I'm not from the south. Okay. But that sounds right. Okay. All right. So hypotonic, the cell is going to swell. So if you got a water balloon, right, and you put it under the faucet, you do what? You fill it up, right? And it does what? It gets bigger, it expands, right? So a cell is going to expand in a hypotonic solution because there means there's more water and less solute. In isotonic, they're balanced, they're equal. So equal part water and solute going in and out of the cell and the solution. Okay? So here's hypotonic. So inside the cell, okay, there's less dissolved stuff outside. So hypo. Everybody following me? So more water, and the water is going to move from high to low, okay? And then the water will then swell, make the cell swell. Because if we're in the solution, what this is showing you, okay, because I don't want you to get confused, if you take a cell and you put it in a beaker, because you're going to see this today on one of your activities, you're going to have a beaker and a cell inside. When it's talking about the solution, it's talking about what's in the beaker. So this is the solution in the beaker. So there are more molecules in this cell. So that means there's more water out here because the less molecules, right? So the water wants to go where? Inside, right? Are y'all following me? Okay, I don't want you to get confused because these can get tricky. So the water is going to go inside because there's more out here and we eventually want to be what? Equilibrium, balanced, okay? In an isotonic, this is the easy one. That means that whatever there is balanced, so it's equal. So equal water outside and inside the cell. So this white part here, think of this like the beaker, and then this yellow guy here is your cell, okay? So there's equal parts solute inside and outside and equal part water, so it is balanced. Yes. Yep. Yep, it'll keep balancing itself out. And then the last one is hypertonic. So this is going to be the complete opposite of hypotonic, okay? So in this situation, you see more solute outside of the cell than you do inside of the cell. So that means there's more what inside?
Solid.
So more, that's right. So tell me the simple term.
What?
Water. You're not wrong. That's a good way to look at it. But there's more water in here, okay? So more water in here, so that means the water wants to go where? Wants to go out, okay? You said that, right? So there's more solute here, less here. So that means if there's more solute, there's less water. Less solute, more water. So if there's more water, the water wants to go out, because remember, we're talking about osmosis. So the molecules are not moving. The water is what is moving. Okay? Are y'all following me? So if the water moves out of the cell is going to do what? It's going to shrink. If the water moves in, it's going to expand, swell. Okay? Y'all following me? All right. So up here, just an example. So the water, remember we did yesterday, how much water would be in here? And how much here? So that means the water wants to go where? Inside. But if we were talking about diffusion, where do the molecules want to go? There you go, boom. Okay, so the last one is facilitated diffusion. And facilitated diffusion, we're still going from high to low, no energy, okay? But the molecules need a little bit of help to get through. So that's where this protein channel comes into play, okay? So they're still going from high to low, but they need a little bit of help. Still no energy, they just move with the help of a protein, okay? Any questions? Are you sure? Okay, now we're gonna talk about active transport. So active is low to high, so we need energy to get up the hill. So this is going backwards. So instead of being at the top of the slide, we're at the bottom of the slide. And it takes a what? A lot of what? Energy to get up there, right? Okay? Especially those ones that look like that, because they're slippery. All right. So in active transport, molecules move against the gradient because we are going from low to high, okay? And we need energy, and that energy is in the form of ATP, which we have talked about before, okay? That is cellular energy. So remember, active goes against the gradient. Passive is going to go with. Okay? So the best example of active transport is the sodium-potassium pump. And remember the other day we saw the nerve cell, right? I showed you all that in here. Okay? This is what allows the nerves in our body to send electrical signals. Okay? So you have sodium, the sodium-potassium pump, so you have sodium-potassium ions that get pumped in and out of the cell. Okay? So the best way to think of this, a pump, think of like a soap pump, right? What do you need to pump the soap for? Enhance energy, right? So that's a sodium-potassium pump. Two other types of active transport are endo and exocytosis. So remember, if we don't know what something means, take the prefix, suffix, or root word out, right? So endo, exo. What do we hear? Endo, exo. Yeah, exo outside, exit. and endo is gonna be inside, okay? So endocytosis is when large substances can be moved into the cell as the cell membrane surrounds it and pinches it off. So it is engulfing it and bringing it in, okay? Exo is the opposite, so it's going to move it outside of the cell membrane. So the outward movement of large molecules as the cell membrane pushes it out. So endo, in, exo, out, okay? So this brings us back to homeostasis, which we said is what? Where? Inside. Okay, so cells do active transport so they can achieve homeostasis and maintain stable internal conditions. Okay? So if a shipwreck crew drank salt water, they could die. Why?
It's not purified.
Okay? Yep. Okay? Because what's happening to the cells? They're shrinking, right? So that's what? What solution? These ones are going to take some practice. Hyper. Okay. So think the best way to remember hypo, think pop. Hypo, expand. So if something is too big, it's going to pop. Hypo. Hyper, shrinks, shrivels up. Okay. Now, if a bowl of fresh strawberries is sprinkled with sugar, a few minutes later they will be covered with juice. So what? Why would they be covered in juice if the sugar? Because the sugar's going where? Inside, so the water, right? Same thing if you go to the grocery store, right? And you go in the produce section buy lettuce and stuff. What happens out there? What do they do at the store? Yeah, why? What does it make it look? Bigger, fresh, right? Whereas if it didn't have water, it's going to start to do what? Shrink, right? Y'all, that makes sense now? Real life stuff. Always think of real life stuff, okay? All right, so we're going to go through this and see. Molecules. Remember I told you when you're looking at something, always look for the key words. What direction are the molecules going to move? Yep, double-sided arrow or one way, one the other, right? Going to stay the same. All right, look at keywords. What's moving? Water. What color is the water?
It'll stay the same one.
The water's blue. What color is the sugar?
The sugar's gonna change.
So where does the water want to go?
Oh, never mind.
Where's there more water? On the right or left? So where does it want to go? To the left.
The sugar's gonna.
To the left. To the left. Okay? All right, now what's it asking for? Where's the water going to move? Because it's telling us the membrane is impermeable to salt. If it's impermeable to salt, what does that mean? Okay, the salt isn't moving. The water wants to go inside. Okay? So remember, I told you the best way to do this is if you write those numbers down so that you don't confuse yourself. Okay? Ricky, I need you to pay attention up here, not be doing something else. Okay? Because how much water? Inside? Outside? So it's going to go, sorry, the slides were mixed up. Out. This was the one before. My bad. All right. So a series shows a solution of water and dye molecules. We saw something similar to this yesterday. Over time, the dye molecules move across the membrane toward equilibrium, which will change most as the system moves toward equilibrium.
Yes, they are.
The concentration of the dye molecules, because remember they're gonna do what? Spread out, expand. They're gonna disperse throughout the water. All right, so in diffusion, molecules move from an area of what to what? High to low. Does it require energy?
No.
No. Which organelle or part of the cell acts like a semi-permeable membrane? Cell membrane. And semi-permeable means what?
It chooses who.
Yes. Chooses what goes in and out. In osmosis, water moves from what to what? High to low, because this is still what type of transport?
Yes.
Passive. Okay, still moving high to low. Does it require energy? Bless you.
Wait, no.
No, high to low. If it's going high to low, does not require energy. Okay? All right, so in active transport, molecules move what? There we go, low to high. Does it require energy? Yes. How does active transport differ from passive?
One requires. And one
Bless
goes
you.
higher than the
Okay, so active, tell me what it needs or doesn't need? Energy, and it goes from what? Low to high, and passive
I mean, it doesn't need it.
doesn't need energy. Very good.